When I was a young little boy, I had a PS2, a race car bed, and unmonitored access to the family computer. This has caused irreversible damage. Back in the 2000s, Flash games were as close to the Wild West internet as you could get. Want a Mario fan game? Done. You want a racing game? Done. Want something a bit more naughty? Gotcha. Want a George Bush White House defense game? No problem at all, my friend. We're going to take a look back at a bunch of these that I find nostalgic, ranging from ones that are super popular to ones that literally like 7 people have ever heard of. Not just that though. No. We're going over everything here. We're looking at games, and we're looking at animations. We're looking at songs. We're looking at the unyielding passage of time. We're looking at websites. Really, we got a bit of everything to cover in this one, so strap in, because it's going to be a long one. Just for a quick bit of video lore before we get into things proper, I'm using the Flashpoint archive to check out all these games. It's got like 190,000 games on it as of now, and it's still growing. All the games on here are browser games they've archived, with a good portion of that being Flash games. The archival effort here has pretty much single-handedly saved a ton of Flash games from becoming lost media, and it's a great project that made this video possible. Now that's enough talking, let's get to gaming. Let's go. Gaming. Let's go, Age of War. Now this is one of those contenders for biggest Flash game of all time. Even the soundtrack for this one has millions of views on YouTube. This one is a pretty simple strategy game where your goal is to destroy the enemy's base while keeping your own safe at the same time. The whole gimmick here is that, as the name implies, the game spans different ages of war. You start out in caveman Ooga Booga times and progress through the eras until you reach future soldier warfare. You got 3 different types of soldiers you can make, being melee, ranged, and a tank, sometimes literal. These soldiers will spawn in and begin marching towards the enemy base, and if they run into anyone, they'll attack them. You can't control the troops. The only input you have is making more, and a rechargeable ultimate that changes with the era. When I said this game was simple, I really wasn't lying. Unless you get lucky or employ some strategy I don't know about, you're pretty much guaranteed to end up finishing the game about 15 minutes after it's lost its charm in the final era, because both sides will just be sending out a constant barrage of goons with pretty much no restrictions. Even if you aren't actively sending anyone out, you can set up unbreakable infinite ammo turrets to guard your base as well. That will just wipe out anything that comes by your base. But the enemy can do that as well, so these games, they just feel like they go on forever. Feel free to make fun of me though, if I was just missing something obvious, or put skill issue in the comments. The background song by Waterflame plays eternally on repeat, which, whew, it can get a bit annoying, but it's a jock jam, so I'll let it slide. The devs thought this too, since they also tossed it in the sequel as the only song. Speaking of though, the sequel is pretty similar. It has the same general setup, but with small alterations like new eras, new troops, and a different leveling system. Besides that, it's generally the same. Still good, don't get me wrong, but just not really worth diving into here. Also, I never really played the sequel, just the original, so I don't have too much more to say on it anyways. Despite a couple flaws, this is definitely a top tier Flash game, which got an appropriate amount of recognition. Check it out if you haven't. Let's keep this rolling. The Papa's Pizzeria series is one of a handful that survived the Great Flash Purge and expanded into its own thing on different platforms while maintaining both its popularity and original appeal. Things started all the way back in 2007 with the release of Papa's Pizzeria, and then continued with things like Papa's Burgeria, Taqueria, and plenty more Rias, all following the same Papa's Something Ria title scheme. Now the original Papa's Pizzeria is a simple little game where you take orders and you make it a pizza. Nothing is stopping you from playing normally or going nuclear on a paying customer's meal. This one is a Flash classic, probably up there in the top 10 biggest Flash releases of all time, despite releasing around the middle of Flash's lifespan. There's something really fun about the freedom the series gives you while you're making food for your customers, and with how crowded the place can get in later levels, it's a stressful, in a fun way, game. Now I remember playing these all the time back in school with classmates, in the library, on lousy old Dell PCs with Windows XP. We'd have competitions for who could make the most disgusting, inedible, garbage, slop, biohazard foods imaginable. This one is genuinely a good game, and great for a Flash game, but I don't think I've ever seen anyone play this one seriously for more than like 20 minutes, absolute max, before deciding to make an absolutely diabolical meal. This beginning segment is filled with a lot of really iconic ones because I wanted to start off with a bang, and this is definitely another top tier Flash game. The Fancy Pants Adventure is another one of those games where if you were around for this, you've tried it at least once. It's a great little platformer with beautiful animations and a very fun soundtrack. This one was so big that it got ported to consoles, and there was even a Steam release as recent as 2017, but that's not what we're looking at. We're looking at the OG from 2006. You play as this stick character named Fancy Pants Man. He's got flowing hair and fancy pants, which should come as no surprise. You've got a jump, a roll, and that's it, really. The controls in this first one are pretty simplistic, but they get the job done. It's closer to 2D Sonic than Mario, if you want a more direct comparison. The animation is what really makes this one stick out. Get it? Get it? Because it's like a Stickman game. The animation here is smooth to an absurd degree. Almost too smooth. I won't lie, in this first one, and I'm only speaking solely about the original, not the Steam release, not the sequels or anything else, the style is kind of all it's really got going for it, as I find the controls are a little iffy, the enemies are kind of meh, and the moveset's a bit too simple. Still fun, but future games are definitely way better to control and are just better all around. With that said, it's kind of pointless to be criticizing Flash games from 2006, so yeah, that's all I'm going to say on that. I would have played the rest in order, but the second game was really broken on Flashpoint when I played. That could just be me though, I don't know. Check out the Steam version if you're interested in this. The reviews say it's very good. Next. Interactive Buddy is a very simple game where you get to be buddies with this little funny guy here. It's very old and very popular, so it doesn't need too much of an introduction. All you gotta know is you can be his buddy by tickling him, just hanging out with him, playing catch with him. Yeah, you can straight up bully this little goober, or be his best bro depending on how sadistic you're feeling. Seeing as how most people who played this were kids or teenagers, I'm assuming most chose to do as much harm as possible to him. And no, I did. Since this was a 2004 game, there's some very 2004 costumes you can grab for the buddy. You've got W. Bush, John Kerry, Bill Gates, Napoleon Dynamite, and Michael Moore, along with a few more obscure ones. Now, being a little Canadian boy at the time I played these, I didn't have a damn clue who most of these people were, except like maybe Bill Gates. Even then, I probably didn't know. These skins don't really change anything, but they do all have custom lines as opposed to the stock buddy being a mute. The Strawberry Clock skin even has audible voice lines instead of text. I want to ride the Russellcopter! Now this game is, I think, unique. Now I don't know how common this was since I was never a user, but this one was apparently published and hosted by DeviantArt, or on DeviantArt at least. Again, I don't know how big the DeviantArt Flash game scene was, but this is the only one I remember being originally from there. That's just what I remember though. I'm not saying it wasn't a thing. If someone with more knowledge on this would let me know, that'd be great. Because I'm genuinely curious. I didn't know DeviantArt hosted Flash games. I thought it was just art and like weird stuff. This one is definitely one of my, and I'm sure a lot of people's favorites. Stick RPG is one of the most iconic Flash games of all time. In relation to other stick figure stuff, it's a definite contender for the biggest stick game. If you played Flash at all back in the day, there's no way you haven't at least tried this one out. It was everywhere for good reason. If you've never heard of it, Stick RPG is by XGen Studios, who also made a bunch of other classics like Defend Your Castle, Motherlode, the sequel to this game, and Stick Arena Dimensions. The game itself has you controlling a stick figure, which you get to name and set stats for. You get choices to be a brainiac nerd, a charmer, a fighter, or a jack of all trades. The skills you choose will determine what kind of jobs and activities are open to you. For this playthrough, I decided I'm going to go with my boy Schmiz. He's a scrawny little schmuck with a lot of charm and a giant pulsating brain vein. Now in this game you have complete freedom to do whatever you want. You can get into fights, work at McSticks flipping burgers, gamble away everything. The world's your oyster. If you want to get criminal too, you can even participate in illegal criminal badman activities. Now I'll be honest here and say that as a kid, my innocent little mind didn't know what coke was, so all the dealer stuff just went completely over my head. I didn't know what any of this meant. I never even knew up until recently that you could use the buses to visit other areas if you show up at the earliest possible time. I usually just grinded up the corporate ladder and became a CEO most of the time. Speaking of which, with Schmiz, I grinded up the corporate ladder and became a CEO within less than a month. Absolutely legendary grind set. After you reach this point, the game gets a little more grindy, just racking up cash and putting it away in the bank. If you just put a decent amount into the bank and then sleep for a couple weeks, the daily compound interest will make you loaded beyond your wildest dreams, pal. There's also a handful of side quests you can do, like getting this young fella some cigarettes, which you'll get a skateboard for, which is the first thing you should do on every playthrough because it saves so much time. I can't imagine doing this game without the skateboard. It would be hell. Overall, this is a very simple but very effective game. You're just a simple stickman trying to make his way on this floating rock. It also references some of their older titles, like how you can buy the castle from Defend Your Castle. I also just never even knew the fact that you can trade stocks at all until this playthrough, so I dropped a cool 10 milli on trash stocks, hoping for a rally, and I lost it all. Alright, big risk here, robbing the bank. $30? The only thing you're limited by in this game is the time limit, which limits everything you can do in a day, including a situation early on where I didn't have time to give a homeless man $10. In case you're curious, Schmiz's journey came to an end when he blew a month of CEO salary on a little bit of white snow, caffeine pills, a gun, and a bus ticket to Vegas. His trip sadly came to a premature close when Girl Scouts beat him within an inch of his life and left him in an alley. Now, I tried out a hacked version of the game with everything unlocked just to see if I missed anything, and from what I learned, I still have a ton to learn about this game, because I never even knew you could run for mayor of the city. This is one of those games where every time I play it, I learn something new. It's 20 years old at this point, but even then I'd say give this one a shot if you've never played it before. It holds up very well for a Flash game. Let's go. We got Portal the Flash game. Now, Portal the Flash game really was a boundary breaker for what Flash was capable of at the time of its release. It came out a day before Portal 1 released, and is one of the most complex Flash games of its era. There's so much to talk about with this one that there's been a full documentary-length video produced about its history and impact, so I definitely recommend checking that out since I'm no expert and there's simply just so much. Skipping over the rabbit hole that's everything surrounding this one, the game itself really is just a 2D version of Portal. Now, it's not a direct port of the game, mind you, but rather a 2D interpretation with its own puzzles, levels, and gimmicks. But overall, it has the same general gameplay and presentation as the original, but on a 2D plane. One funny thing with this game is that this 2D reimagining of Portal has had a 3D reimagining as a mod for the actual game, so it came full circle. If somehow you've never heard of the actual Portal games or this, the basic rundown is that you've got a portal gun which shoots out an entrance and an exit. You can shoot it onto flat white surfaces, and you retain momentum while going through the portals, including if you jump or fall into one, which would propel you forward through the exit. There's a bunch of levels to go through, each with traps, platforming, and puzzles to solve, and really it's as simple as that. I remember I played this one every now and then as a kid, since I couldn't run the actual game, but I still loved it. With this one, I'd recommend simply trying it out because it's still really good, especially if you like Portal. It holds up fine, it's a great game. Boxhead, let's go. Now, this is a series of games from the mid-2000s where you fight off hordes of zombies coming at you in endless waves. For the majority of the series, you play as John Bambo, fighting waves upon waves of zombies, demons, and other mysterious creatures until you inevitably bite the dust. The original game is very different though, being a game where you escort civilians to safety in a zombie apocalypse. You get a basic set of weapons in each game, such as the pistol with infinite ammo, the Uzi, the shotgun, and a few other weapons and items. The more zombies you kill, the more weapons and upgrades you unlock. For a more recent example, it's kinda similar to Vampire Survivors. The controls are a bit more simple on this one though, and your movement and shooting, for the majority of this series, is limited to 8 directions, which was pretty outdated even back then. A lot of the time you'll miss easy shots point blank just because they're in an awkward direction from you. Looking at the series overall, I don't know how we went from rescue civilians to whatever this is. Not that I don't like the later games, that they're bad, but they took a pretty sharp turn in direction. It wasn't even gradual. Between the first game and the second one, called Boxhead the Rooms, it became a wave-based horde shooter. I don't know what happened between that, but they had a change of heart. Now for my thoughts, I really liked this series as a kid. It was a great time waster. And I remember playing the multiplayer ones at school and reaching some pretty high waves. I've got some pretty fond memories of setting up giant bases made of explosive barrels and barricades, and just letting zombies pile up so I can blow them up en masse. Another strat I used was to make some sort of funnel that the zombies would go through one by one, where I could easily take them out, which usually worked pretty well, until it didn't. It was also fun to go on a hack site and play with all the weapons unlocked. Made you feel like a god. I never really paid attention to this one in its later years, where it seems to me like it really fell off a cliff. The signature art style got revamped and just lost pretty much all of its personality. It became more mobile oriented and had elements locked behind Facebook accounts, and overall it had lost all of its charm. I don't even have to make a joke about this because it speaks for itself. The last game in the series is a Justin Bieber parody game. Yeah, it was washed at this point. I gotta say though, that doesn't detract from the originals. Those are cool games, awesome games, worth a try if you never played them. Definitely check those out. Happy Wheels is, I have in the script that it's a serious contender for the most popular Flash game of all time. I'm gonna keep this one real. There's no way that it's not the biggest Flash game ever. Unless I'm forgetting something like absolutely massive. This game took the internet by storm back in the day. And what's most impressive with this one too, is that you couldn't even play the full game on most of the bigger Flash sites. Only on the official site, Total Jerkface, where it still resides today. Everywhere else it was just a handful of maps and characters for the demo. Now this is, from what I know, and I'm no expert, but from what I know, this was pretty uncommon for Flash games, as most were published and hosted by one of the bigger sites like Newgrounds or Armor Games. It helps a lot that this one was a total cash cow for tubers back in the day, with countless Let's Play channels making never-ending videos on it, which definitely brought it a lot of eyes. Now for those of you that haven't really seen this one, either by avoiding it when it was big, or just never really having heard of it in the first place, the game has you playing as a variety of different characters, each with their own gimmick. You got a wheelchair guy with a jet strapped to the wheel, the bike dad with the sun on the back, the Segway guy, the lawnmower guy, and plenty more. Now in Happy Wheels, I'm pretty sure, not 100%, but I'm fairly certain, every level in the game is community made, with the featured tab being hand-picked levels by the developers from the community, usually to show off exceptional maps. There's also a community level tab, which is just absolute chaos, usually filled with garbage, but nowadays, I don't know. I haven't checked in a long while. I remember back in 2012 or so, every third level in this community browser would be about destroying Justin Bieber in a variety of ways, which has probably changed. Probably. As a whole, the game's gimmick is just blood, blood, gore, blood, with all the characters being able to be ripped apart pretty graphically, or even entirely eviscerated into little giblets. Now this gameplay element is one of the main contributors to the game's popularity, as this extended from the adult characters all the way down to the child ones, which was pretty edgy for the time, and I mean it really still is to this day. It's all cartoony violence though, so it's not that bad or anything, but it's just shocking the first time you see it. I mentioned that this one was big with tubers back in the day, and that was absolutely the case. This raked in millions of views for the big dogs of the era. This got to a point where they even had Uber Haxer Nova come on to voice one of the characters in the game, the pogo stick guy. I think it's fair to say that without the Let's Players, this game would not have gotten as big as it is, but also vice versa, as this brought in so many views for the YouTubers. I would even see videos in the millions of views occasionally, only like a couple years back. I didn't watch them, but I gotta know, like, do people still play this? Is this still like a huge thing? Like, no way, right? This game is like 13 years old. Really, this game had the perfect storm of circumstances and features. It had custom user-made levels coming out constantly. It came out at the peak of the Let's Play era, and it was edgy and violent enough to make for great reactions. I'm sorry if I talked about the tubers too long here, but I mean, I was in the target audience age range at the time, and they were kind of a big part of my exposure to the game. I'll wrap that up now though. Despite being a pretty simple game, it was big time addicting. I remember playing this one on an old laptop into the very late hours of the night at like 3 FPS, with school the next morning because I just couldn't put it down. The endless amount of user-made levels did not help this addiction. I mentioned it earlier, but it's funny nowadays how sorting by top all time has a bunch of levels from the early 2010s that are like, throw swords at Justin Bieber, throw swords, let's go, Bieber. Are you Chuck Norris? Like there's so goddamn many of them, it's hilarious. They're all the exact same thing too. Bonus points in these if they also have a reference to Chuck Norris or PewDiePie, which most of them did. Aside from the trash and joke levels though, there are like a lot of very well made levels with their own lore, beautiful art for what they were working with, or entirely new gameplay systems. And as I said earlier, if they were good enough, they even got promoted to the main level tab, where they were played by millions of people. Now I gotta mention the physics. The physics in this one were weird. There were all kinds of glitches you could do, like flying with the bike dad. If you just spammed left and right, you could bypass a ton of levels with this. Also, sometimes you could be playing perfectly and just have your legs fall off because of the weird physics. This game definitely wasn't perfect, and isn't perfect. I mean, it still exists. It didn't go anywhere. For some reason, despite me playing this one a ton and loving it back in the day, I never really developed any sort of nostalgia for it. If I were to guess why, the best guess I can come up with is that due to it kind of sticking around in pop culture, or yeah, I mean at least online culture throughout the 2010s, it never really faded out of memory. Now, since it never faded out, I never really felt like I wanted to go back to the good old times, since the good old times stuck around for years. Now, nostalgia to me usually comes when I play or do something that I haven't played, seen, or done, or heard about, or even remembered in years. With Happy Wheels, since it's stuck around for so long and I occasionally saw it in YouTube feeds and elsewhere, I never really, forgot it or developed any long-term nostalgia for it. With most of these other games, when I came back to them when Flashpoint released, and even for this video, it was a rush of nostalgia, even for the shittiest games, because they really brought me back to the golden days of Flash and my childhood. But when I play Happy Wheels, I just don't get that same rush or any feeling really. I don't know. It's weird. There's no real point I'm trying to make here either. I'm not going to come out with a big revelation. I just thought it was interesting that something that seems like a prime perfect candidate for being a nostalgic game, it makes me feel nothing at all. Absolutely nothing. If anyone else has experiences like this, not just regarding Happy Wheels obviously, I'd like to hear them because I want to know that I'm not crazy, that this isn't just what is this guy talking about? Thinking about it now, and I'm sorry for getting off topic, I can say the same thing regarding Five Nights at Freddy's. As a young teenager, as a young strapping young man, I was interested in the first couple games and then kind of fell out around the third. Now that was almost a decade ago at this point, and I don't feel anything nostalgic about that because it's stuck around for so goddamn long. Aside over, that's just a second example I thought of while writing the script. Just hopping back on topic for a brief little bit, I wanted to mention Total Jerkface, the website. It has one other game on it called Divine Intervention. I never really played this for more than 5 minutes because it was hard and kind of jank, but I felt it had to be mentioned because it's pretty popular, probably due to being on the same website as Happy Wheels, and also people might be upset if I didn't at least bring it up. That's all I really have to say though, because again, I never really played it. Now, if you went around for Flash games, back in the day, you didn't just download them. You didn't just randomly find them. Generally, you had to go onto one of the big host websites that existed at the time. You had the big ones like Newgrounds, Armor Games, Miniclip, and a handful of others. But there was also a ton that are just completely forgotten today. I figured I'd start out by looking at probably the most important one, Newgrounds. Founded in 1995 by Tom Fulp, this is one of the most important websites of all time for internet pop culture in general. Numerous early memes, creators, and iconic animations came from this site, and it's still going relatively strong today. Before YouTube came around, this was the place for animators and artists to put their stuff, and the numbers on older stuff go to show that. Now, I was way too young to be actively around for its golden era of the early 2000s, but I did play on this one plenty as a kid, because this site just had everything, and still has everything, from games to animation, even music. There's literally too many to list, but Newgrounds was also an origin point for a ton of game devs and animators that are super high profile nowadays. We're talking about people who have gotten their animations to TV, or games published by massive publishers. And that's not even talking about the hundreds of animators who went on to have thriving careers on YouTube. We'll get more into the specifics of that later in the video, but for now, just know that it's very likely one of your favorite creators has some sort of history starting at Newgrounds. Just as an example, because I've got nowhere else to put this, and because he's the GOAT, but even Jerma985 had one of his earliest internet things on Newgrounds, where he did voice work in 2005, 6 years before his first TF2 video, for a short called Salty Swamp.
No. I'm just fishing for the super, ultra rare, sacred fish of Salty Swamp. Sorry.
Now, I'm not gonna lie, a lot of early Newgrounds stuff and early Flash stuff in general, while it's great, it's good stuff, it can usually be described as creators seeing what they could get away with, rather than actually trying to make interesting or compelling stuff. To be fair though, these were uncharted territories at the time. What could you get away with? Nobody actually knew back then. Nowadays there's all kinds of child protection laws and internet regulations, but back in the Wild West days of the internet, these kinds of things had to be tested, so we had some pretty sick, twisted, and gnarly content. We'll get into a bunch of Newgrounds stuff over this video, so I don't want to dump everything on you now, but if you're wondering why it survived so long, it's simply because it's a great website for artists to host all their stuff still. While it isn't as big as it once was, the site still has plenty of active users and a very tight-knit community. And also, I was told I would be crucified if I didn't mention Friday Night Funkin' which is the most played game of all time on the site despite only being up for 3 years. The game is a celebration of Newgrounds stuff with all kinds of mods to add new music and characters. I'm really no expert on this, but it had a hand in boosting some old Newgrounds stuff back to relevancy, like the Pico series. Thinking about it now, I didn't check that. I think I heard about that. I don't know if that's actually true, but I think it's true. Now, I'm going to be honest, I don't know much Fun Floor, so I'm the last person to ask about this, but it had to be mentioned. Now, Newgrounds has an almost unbeatable list of Flash games in terms of impact. You have the previously mentioned Friday Night Funkin', but also an absolutely stacked list of classics as well. Starting with the big one that started it all, you can't talk about Newgrounds without talking about Pico's school. In the game, you play as Pico, where he survives the day at school, where he's gonna battle a bunch of naughty students to save the day from their little scheme. It's a bit edgy. No, it's a lot edgy, but I mean, it's pretty par for the course at the time, and it helps the game's message. This one was made by Tom Fulp, who, as mentioned earlier, is the founder and still the owner of Newgrounds. It was pretty much the driving force behind Newgrounds really taking off back then, and has left enough of an impact to have a designated Pico Day held every year on the site. This is a little competition where artists and animators can submit themed art and animations, which are then judged and given prize money. Now, this is a very important game, but I don't have too much more to say about it, to be honest. Another big hitter, another big one, Alien Hominid. Now, Alien Hominid is very noteworthy because this was a big enough of a hit, and it was a very early example of this, to get a full console release on PS2 and GameCube back in the day. In the game, he plays the funny alien blasting away at Men in Black and a couple bosses in a side-scrolling format. It's a pretty hard game, but it's got nice animation and is pretty fun. The guys behind this one, which again includes Tom Fulp, went on to found the company called The Behemoth, which has made some pretty awesome games like Castle Crashers, Battle Block Theater, and of course Alien Hominid. Also, as a quick note, this one just got a remaster on Steam and a sequel as well. Be sure to check them out. Just as one more example from The Behemoth on Flash, Dad and Me was a very fun 2D beat 'em up where you just absolutely deck kids as this swole little man. So I don't know what the deal is with this one or why it's so goddamn popular. It's up very high on Newgrounds' top all-time list in terms of plays, and the only real reason I can think of for that is the violence. Just for context, as a rundown, this one had you playing as the titular Skull Kid. Initially armed with a chainsaw, you chainsaw your way through an office building, including through people. There's more to it after that, but it's all on that same level of kill mode. I don't dislike it, I'm just curious why it was so popular. I gotta say though, between the walk cycle, cartoony graphic violence, and the funny music, this game is unintentionally hilarious. Newgrounds Rumble is a Smash clone, in a good way, which has a bunch of Newgrounds icons duking it out on a bunch of different maps. It's got all kinds of modes, a full campaign, and is another pretty cool love letter to the site. It's from 2007 though, so it's missing a few of the later icons. Don't have much more to say on it. Played it, thought it was cool, wanted to talk about it. That's it. Of course, in the Newgrounds segment, I also gotta mention Meat Boy, but we're gonna wrap back to him later, so sit tight. We'll talk more meat in a minute. So one of the top, and I mean top, all-time played games on Newgrounds is this game called Insane Orb. I've literally never heard anyone talk about this game, nor have I ever seen it. I must have been living under a rock or something. It's actually just Pong, but with a few additions like gravity fields and beams you can shoot at the ball. That's it. Third highest submission of all time. It's Pong. Back to a wicked badass game. Miami Shark is one of the greats, in my opinion, deserves its own celebration day on Newgrounds as well. Get Miami Shark Day rolling. Come on, Newgrounds. Miami Shark Day. Get it moving. Get it up. Get those cash prizes flowing.
Miami Shark! Let's go! Miami Shark!
Remember Miniclip, hub for thousands of iconic Flash games? This is it now. What the hell happened here? Back when I was a kid, Miniclip was probably my most visited Flash game site, but there's no real games I want to talk about in specific for this segment. This isn't a, like, wow, remember these cool old games they made segment, but rather a sort of, remember how cool this site was segment. And I gotta say, Miniclip was the shit back in the day. They had everything from racing games, shmups, first-person shooters, arcade games, the whole shebang. At their peak, they were valued at $270 million, and that's for good reason. This was one of the sites to play some games on. Nowadays, they're pretty much exclusively held up by their 8-ball pool game, as well as a few other weird shitty mobile games made to rake cash in. Modern day Miniclip is such a sad sight, because when you think about it, Miniclip had all the resources in the world to continue running Flash games, similar to how Newgrounds made the Newgrounds player, but they just didn't. I guess the higher-ups just didn't see much of a purpose in that though, because what we're left with is whatever Miniclip is today. As a funny bit that I didn't know how to slot in anywhere, here's 2001's Miniclip homepage. I mean, look at this. You got true classics like you got Bill Clinton Britney Brawl, crazy 3D golf. You got crazy 3D golf and the tennis, and of course, how could I forget? Bop. I wanted to highlight Nitrome for this video because they had a really nice art style. I always, and I still do, like. They always have a super clean pixelated style in all their games, which is just, it's super easy on the eyes. The music and sound was also pretty distinct, just giving the overall package A+ quality. Very clean and professionally made, little arcadey Flash games. Also, most of their games are co-op, so that's a massive W on top of all that. Even if I covered 7 or 8 games, it would just be a fraction of their total output. Like, these guys have made a lot of games, and they still do. Just recently, they made Shovel Knight Dig, as well as Bomb Chicken and a couple other projects, so they're doing fine in a post-Flash world. As a kid, I remember playing a game called Frostbite, which was this cute little platformer where you climb a mountain while grabbing candies, ice cream, and popsicles, while brutally meat-hooking and executing the local wildlife. Had a very fun time with that one. The sequel is pretty much the same thing, but expanded, optimized, and overall better. Now, the Rubble Trouble series is probably their most popular. This is a series where you play as a demolition crew in various cities across the globe. You and the crew have got to blow buildings to smithereens, wrecking ball buildings to smithereens, airstrike buildings to smithereens, and stack up wads of cash while you're at it. The Tokyo version even has stuff like Mecha Godzilla and sumo wrestlers to help you out. There's a catch to most missions though, like having a designated area where you have to keep all your rubble to stop it from impacting other buildings, or having limited use items that really make you think about how you're going to go about each level. Overall, this is a very fun little puzzle series with that same nice, clean art style and easy on the ears sound design. If you can't tell, they've got like a ton of variety in their games. I remember playing Magic Touch, which was this small little game where you counter paratroopers by drawing their balloon icon with your mouse, wizard style. They also made action platformers like their Final Ninja series. Really, Nitrome had a bit of everything, and that's pretty dandy. Another fond memory I have of Flash games from back when I was in school was when we'd occasionally challenge each other to get as far as possible in one of many rage games. Usually this was something like QWOP or the world's hardest game. Sometimes though we'd band together to try and get through them, or collectively try to get through the puzzle and memory ones like the Impossible game. This one wasn't really one I played in school or at all really, but I gotta start out by mentioning the iconic Winnie the Pooh Home Run Derby. This was an official Disney product Flash game that got absurdly hard by the end. They start throwing physics-defying curveballs and literal invisible fastballs, and you gotta knock like 30 out of 40 out of the park to progress. And despite all that, the version I'm playing here is considered the easy version. The balls in the English version are slowed down compared to the Japanese version, which is a truly legendary rage game. I'd recommend checking out some old videos of people playing this one if you've never heard of it, because it's a classic. I mentioned it just a bit earlier, but QWOP is another legendary one. But I'm gonna be honest, there's not much to talk about with it, so I'm gonna be real short with this one. You control this guy's legs with your Q, W, O, and P keys, and unless you've got it down perfectly, you're gonna fall over pretty quickly. The only point of the game is to make it as far as possible. Now, Meat Boy, told you we were gonna wrap back to this one. Meat Boy is probably the most popular rage game. Definitely up there at least, but I mean, really, it's not even a rage game necessarily, it's just a very hard platformer. It got turned into a full game later as Super Meat Boy, and that version blows the Flash game away in terms of quality. The Flash version though, as you're getting from point A to point B in each level, having to reach the Bandage Girl to end each one. Throughout each level you gotta dodge all kinds of traps like saws and breakable platforms, and all you have in your moveset is running, jumping, and wall jumping. Again, the Flash version's alright, but if you want a true meat experience, then play Super Meat Boy. Last one I want to talk about here, that I also mentioned earlier. The Impossible Quiz is a funny troll game. Every question is literal, and you've got to think outside the box, sometimes literally. I don't think I've ever beaten this one because it just keeps going. There's like 100+ questions in the game, and you only get 3 lives with no checkpoints. So anytime you screw up, you're right back at square one. It is pretty fun and pretty funny as well, but it really does live up to the name without a guide. It's a real test of memory and patience, this one. I mentioned earlier that I played this one in school where we would collectively get together and try to get through it all as one. Now, I'm pretty sure doing that is the furthest I've ever gotten in this game, but I'll be honest, we probably only got like 50 questions in before we ran out of time to continue. Fun times though. Fun times. Good times. Block Soars is a very 2007 name and is a pretty simple puzzle game. But the thing that really stands out about this one is that it has this really freaky ambience in it for like literally no reason. Everything's grimy and rusty. It's got a real industrial look and soundscape, and it's really unnerving for a game where you just get a block into a hole. That's all the gameplay is, by the way. You move this brick around levels and try to get it into position so you can end up in these holes to beat the level. That's it. That's all it is. Get the brick from point A to point B, stick it in the hole. That's all you gotta do. Now, it sounds simple, but holy moly, this game can be a pain in the ass. I've never beaten it because I'm just no good at these kinds of puzzles. This one was so memorable, it made it all the way to Flashpoint's Hall of Fame, but in my opinion, remove the aesthetics of this one and it becomes a lot less noteworthy. This one still holds up though because of its simplicity, with the only issue being that it doesn't scale with resolution like a lot of other Flash games, since it's all pre-rendered. So, it kind of looks like trash if you play it in full screen. Give it a shot though. It's weird, it's hard, and it's fun. This one is called Crush the Castle. If you know Angry Birds, you can probably tell what the aim of this one is. It's very similar in concept, except it uses a trebuchet instead of a slingshot. Now, I know I said it was like Angry Birds, but this actually predates it, so I guess it'd be fair to say that Angry Birds is like Crush the Castle, unless there's some other game with this format that I didn't know about that predates all of these. Alright, so I looked it up. Yeah, there is. It's called Castle Clout, that the developers of Crush the Castle took inspiration from. I've never heard of it, but that's the true origin point to the Angry Birds formula. I correct myself here. I'm sorry for misinforming you for that brief period of time. The video will now continue. In this game, you can load up a trebuchet with all kinds of payloads to send flying into the various structures. The aim of each level is to take out every member of the royal family and all of their guard. Unless you took out everyone, you're starting over. It's entirely physics-based destruction, which I absolutely loved when I was younger, since it was so rare to see, especially in Flash games. It also spawned some sequels, but they're more like expansions and level packs rather than anything really worth going over entirely. One good strat to use in all these was just to whip everything you had all at once, so that the building didn't have any time to settle. Relentless attacks always work. Honestly, makes the game a bit too easy, actually. When I was very, very, very young, I was big into monster trucks, as any young lad should be. And golly gee, lucky me, there was no shortage of monster truck Flash games online.
I love monster trucks. Let's go!
They were pretty much all exactly the same thing, and I don't know what originated the gameplay of these, and I don't care enough to find out. They're all side-scrolling racers with arrow key movement using left and right to tilt the truck, as well as using up and down to speed up and brake. Occasionally, you'd get something a bit more exotic, like pressing space to jump, but that was pushing it for a lot of these. Usually tracks consisted of rough terrain and giant hills, or some sort of track where you crush cars and do stunt jumps, and other monster truck activities. This one with the candy ads, Monster Trucks Unleashed, I didn't think existed anymore until Flashpoint came out. It's not good at all, but I remember playing it back in the day, and I thought it was gone. I thought this was removed from the internet entirely. There were some other licensed ones that I think still don't exist anymore, including Flashpoint, but I don't really mind since they're kind of all the exact same game anyways, and who cares? I was never like a massive fan of these because they're pretty simple, but simplicity was good for a little boy me. Also, all of them being the exact same kind of thing meant if you've seen one, you've pretty much seen them all, aside from small differences like having upgrades or time challenges. This type of game isn't limited to monster trucks though, as there's plenty with this exact same side-scrolling arrow key format with other vehicles like cars, and especially motorcycles. Speaking of which, the Trials series is similar to those monster truck games in control scheme, but in these, you control the weight of your rider, being able to lean forward and backwards. This allows you to shift your weight at the end of a ramp to go further, since you've shifted your weight forward. The similarity was seemingly noted by the developers as well, since they also made multiple monster truck games with the same control scheme. There's a bunch of other motorcycle games like this, but in my opinion, Trials is the only one worth talking about because it's the only one I actually remember at all. I never really knew what the deal was with this franchise since it had Flash games, console releases, and multiple publishers. So for this video I did some research and found that it started on Java, moved to Flash with this one, then moved to PC, then they got bought by Ubisoft, and since then they've been making console games. Trials 2 was always the one I played as a kid, and the Flash version's alright. It does some fun stuff like keeping track of how many bones you break and other things like that. I don't know about the Flash version, but I know for a fact in the full version, you could even kill your rider, which is a neat touch. When I was like 9 or 10 years old, I wanted this game for PC because the trailer looked so sick, but I thought it was called Trails 2 because I was a goddamn buffoon boy, so I could never find it. I also thought around the same time that I thought Team Fortress 2 was called Team for Trees 2, so clearly reading comprehension was not my forte.
Bro was 10 when he heard about TF2. What a zoomer. He's a zoomer. He's a zoomer. Get him. He's a zoomer. Get him. He's a zoomer. He's a zoomer. He's a zoomer.
I'm 21. This one's called Mario 63, and it is probably my favorite Flash game of all time. I always loved this one as a kid, and try to come back to it once every few years, at least. At least, I love this game. It's a full-size game which mixes classic 2D Mario, Mario 64, Mario Galaxy, and Mario Sunshine, all into one big amalgamation of yahoos and yippies. While most of the sprites are taken directly from the actual games, the gameplay, I think, is custom-made, and it's actually pretty decent. It's better than most shitty Mario Flash games, at the very least. I learned a couple years ago that there's even speedruns of this game, and they're pretty nuts. They've even got tasks set up that just destroy the game in like 5 minutes. The gameplay itself is closest to Super Mario Sunshine, but translated into 2D. There's a triple jump, flood with all 3 modes, a ground pound, and a spin move for your main controls, as well as a dive that can get you some pretty nutty speed in combination with flood. As for the general premise, it's pretty much just Mario 64, Bowser stole Peach, and you've got to go through Mario 64 levels to find shine sprites. This also isn't some little tech demo or short experience either. I wasn't kidding. It's pretty much a full-length Mario game filled with tons of levels, secret levels, collectibles, secrets, bosses, and power-ups. There's elements from 64, Sunshine, and Galaxy, as well as graphics mainly from Yoshi's Island and sprites from DS games. From start to finish, this one can last you hours, and that's just finishing it, not even including all the secret stars and star coins to collect for 100% completion. Tons of love in this one with all kinds of big and small details too, like the signs having the famous Ella's Real lines on them, a 2D recreation of Bowser's trap room and endless staircase, and bosses from the Mario 64 DS game. Even the levels hold up here, being expansions most of the time on the Mario 64 originals, with new types of stars to collect, new power-ups, and new areas to explore. Hazy Maze Cave is probably the best example of this. As in 63, it's completely overhauled, and it's this giant sprawling cave with tons of verticality, hidden rooms, and massive areas to get lost in. I used to love playing this one, and it's one of few Flash games I actually ended up finishing and 100%ing because I wanted the secret goodies locked behind these star coin doors. One of the best parts about the whole game is that once you get around halfway through, once you get 32 star coins out of 64, they just give you Luigi with no fanfare or anything, and he's just fully playable from then on. I think he's exactly the same as Mario, besides maybe jumping a little higher, but that could be placebo. As for story and dialogue, it's pretty typical Mario stuff, but with some pretty 2000s dialogue and jokes.
Wow, I can't believe you beat King Palm Arm in a battle. It looks so hard even reaching him, let alone poning him like you did. You're my hero. Huh? The blocks. They are broken. I've been trapped in here for over 9,000 years. Oh my god, I'm drowning. Help, I'm drowning.
Just kidding. I'm not really drowning. You see, I'm not even a toad. I'm just disguised as one. I'm really a platypus. Yeah, I'm a platypus in a toad costume.
The orb of power will grant me unimaginable magical abilities, allowing me to summon a meteor. the meteor of ultimate destruction. Then, after my meteor purged it of all the miserable creatures, it now has my master race of Koopas. Those loyal Koopas of which were protected within my castle will expand out and rule all of the Mushroom Kingdom, with me as the supreme ruler.
What's all this talk about a meteor? Meter of ultimate destruction? As for music, this one took songs from all over. There's original music from the games, mostly 64 and Galaxy. Some fan remixes like the Bowser level theme by Paragon X9. And a couple songs from Smash Bros. It's got a good selection of music where no one song really gets old. There's all kinds of stuff to talk about surrounding this one too. Like how it's basically an expansion and remake of another Flash game called Mario Sunshine 64, which was made by the same people. I'll be the first to say that that game is not good at all. It's actually terrible in comparison to 63. But on top of that, there's a remake of Mario 63 being made called Mario 63 Redux, which has all original art and is completely redesigned from the ground up. Oh, you thought we were done? You thought we were done with just those two things? We also got Super Mario 127, which is a fan-made sequel in development. I'm telling you, it is exciting times ahead for the Super Mario 63 fan club. But that's not all about the game. It also had an original level editor, which you could use to upload levels onto the official website. It was like Mario Maker before Mario Maker. I thought this part of the game would definitely be lost at time completely, but imagine my disbelief when I checked on Flashpoint, and not only did the level editor still work, but all the custom levels were still up and running. I was flabbergasted. I genuinely freaked out a little bit. I really did not think they survived Flash dying. With the editor, you can play and even edit anyone else's levels, and I did a few while recording. Most people chose to make platformers without FLUDD instead of the more exploration-based levels of the base game, which is fair because the base game kind of lacks in those levels where you really test it on your platforming skills. Most of the levels I made were absolute garbage, where you'd run and collect like some one-ups, and that was it. Now, I was not a very creative boy. What's going on, guys? We've got my level, Mario's House in Hell. Welcome home, Mario. You are in hell. Whoa. What the hell? I gotta get in my escape cannon. God damn it. What is that up there? What is that? Is that potentially a shine sprite I see? How do I get that? Who put that there? I've got to get my grubby little mitts on that. Come on, Mario. Come on, Mario. You got to make the jump. That's the level, guys. Sure to rate it 5 stars. Slap a like. Overall, this is a goated Flash game. Definitely my top one. The only problem with this one is that pretty much no matter your PC specs or what you're playing on, frame rates can get a little rough. And they're also maxed out at around 30 FPS. At the very least, the load times nowadays are pretty much instant, because I remember back on school computers and my lousy old family computer, sometimes this one would take forever to load, like minutes on end. I had in the script after this part to check out old forums, like the forums from the site. Since then, they've gone down, so that's done. That's not happening. Seems to be the way of a lot of old forums as of late. So, yeah, that sucks. Alright, back with more websites. These ones are a lot more obscure than the juggernauts from earlier. Not unknown, but definitely not even close to the size of those two. These were two of my most played, so I had to check them out again, and surprisingly both were still up somehow. AndCon Arcade is another one of those sites that I played on all the time as a kid. I always loved the design of this site, as it's like the least eye-catching thing in the world. You've got this plain black void background on the site, and these little squares with a single frame from each game. That's all you've got to go off with these games on the site, since there's no descriptions, there's no expanded images, it's just that. Just one frame and a title if you hover over it. You could end up getting totally lost on this site, since it gave you 5 random picks up in the top right corner when you were playing a game. Didn't like what you were playing? Here's 5 more games to try. Didn't like those? 5 more. It was addicting. I always remembered logging into this one, and every time you would get on, there would always be this smug-looking Yoda staring you down like you owed him some money on the front page. And it was just a dress-up game. The biggest reaction you're going to get from this game is, that's kind of funny, I guess. Back on topic, I don't know how sites like these are still up, seeing as you need to do all kinds of workarounds for them to work, and it's not like kids are doing all this shit for old Flash games. Unless I'm underestimating kids, I might be. But really, I don't see why they wouldn't just play phone games, browser games that don't need Flash, or literally anything else. I can see why ones that adapted to Unity or Flash alternatives are still up, but ones like Ancon that are pretty much just Flash and haven't been updated since 2012 are a mystery to me. I mean, obviously, I'm glad they're still up, but for how long will they be? Guess we'll just have to wait and find out. I went through it for a little bit, just playing some of the games through the Y8 browser, so here's like a super lightning round of some games I played for a bit. Super Mario Flash is a front page one, and it actually isn't awful. Pretty decent, actually. Good alternative to the real thing if you don't have a Nintendo console or emulators. Like if you're too young to know what an emulator is. Puppet Boy is a game where George Bush falls on some balls. Gold Miner is actually pretty decent, but it kind of has the feeling of a rigged arcade game if I'm being honest. Ultimate Flash Sonic is like Mario Flash, where it's a decent clone alternative to the real thing, in this case being Sonic Advance. I do remember playing this one a fair bit as a kid. They have a McDonald's satire game on here that I don't know how to play, but it seems decent. One I had stuck on my head, but could never remember the name of until this video, was a game called The Waitress. I found it during the filming of this video after like a decade of searching, and it kinda sucks. It kinda sucks. Hot Dog Bush is goated. Hot Dog Bush is so good. Oh my god. Play Hot Dog Bush right now. Duck Life 4 is a classic where you raise a duck to become a beefcake. Stunt Dirt Bike is just a bad Trials game. Electric Man 2 is great, fun combat, cool animations, music, and style. I played this one for like 20 minutes. It was very good. The game is neat. Now, Hanger is a very fun one where you Spider-Man swing through levels and lose parts of your body if you hit anything. Very cool. And with that, that's kind of all I have to say regarding Ancon. Thinking about it now, I guess I do want to mention that there's a couple I found that I remember, which were online only, that are seemingly just gone forever. Like this one on the front page called Jelly Battle. It's just one of a number of online-only Flash games lost to time, and it's sad that those can never be archived. With that though, now I'm really out of things to say about this, so let's move on to the next website. Stickpage. Stickpage was the place to be if you were at all interested in stick figure stuff. If you haven't heard of it before, it really doesn't need any more elaboration than that. It was that simple. The site hosted all kinds of games and animations that had stick figure characters, with plenty of originals and plenty taken from around the net. Despite not getting updated for years even before the Flash shutdown, this one is still up for some reason. I checked it out with the Y8 browser and it mostly functions as a website, but the games and animations no longer function like at all. They don't even turn on. So the page itself is all that remains. It's useless outside of that. Also, the forum is straight up gone, it seems, and I know that had information on like previous contests and stuff that were hosted, so that kind of sucks. I picked out a couple things to play for this, and I just played them on Flashpoint, and it went really well. So here's the Stickpage lightning round. Zao Zao, I think is how it's said, is a series of games and animations which were pretty popular but kind of forgotten over time. Each game is very unique aside from the stick characters being the same, and based on Newgrounds numbers, the fourth one is the most popular. This is for good reason because it's definitely the best, being this 2D, 3D mix shooter. I like this one because it goes from animation to game to animation, so Zao Zao 1 is an animation, 2 is a game, and repeat. I definitely recommend checking it out. It's not that long and the animations are interesting. Stick War. Now, I never played this one before, but it ended up being the last game they ever advertised on the site, so I checked it out. It's similar to Age of War, but a bit more intuitive. There's levels in the game where you can actually control your units, but it obviously lacks the age part of Age of War. Now, each mission in this one has differing objectives. In some, you've got to defend your statue, and in others it's just all-out war. I like the variety. Without comparing it to Age of War anymore, I can see why this is the one they promoted. It's good. Upon further research, it seems like this series is what they kind of banked on, as Stick War 3 came out only 2 years ago, despite the site being long dead. So it seems like they kind of abandoned the site to focus on this. Reverb is a really weird one I do remember playing a few times. I don't even like this game, I just thought it was really weird as a kid. I don't think I got it. It's one of very few horror games on Stickpage, so it's unique in that way. Last thing I gotta say is that for some reason as a kid, I could never beat this boss, despite it being pretty easy. You just shoot this red ball in the back, and then you shoot the middle. It's that simple. I don't remember why I couldn't beat it, but I would assume it's because it ran at like 8 FPS back then. That's the only reason I can think of. This one called Weapon Fire is pretty cool. It's got lots of different game modes and it's very stylish all around, with some very clean sound design, animation, and effects. I also noticed during this one that the Stickman game creators really liked Counter-Strike. Like, there's so many references to it and so many sound effects taken from it in all these games. Pretty much like 1 in 3 of these games would have some sort of Counter-Strike reference. In this one, pretty much all the guns use Counter-Strike source sounds. Stick Trampoline is a simple one I wanted to try since I remembered it from when I was younger. And yeah, it's definitely Stick Trampoline, like there's not much more to say. X227 is one of very few Stickman games to go full 3D, which, thinking about it, it kind of negates the purpose of Stickmen, being that they're very simple to animate. By the way, 3D Stickman stuff was very uncommon, and it's definitely noteworthy for that alone. This one is really Counter-Strike inspired, like really Counter-Strike inspired, and it's an arcadey rail shooter where you have Counter-Strike weapons with Counter-Strike sounds as you blast away your stick foes. I wanted to play this one all the way through, and was disappointed to find it was only 2 levels long, with the second level ending on a very prolonged climbing segment. Huh? Well, that's done. Last of the lightning round is a game called Defend Your Castle. It's another one of those true classics that's only really popular because it came out pretty early in Flash's lifespan, but it was a fun time waster. I also mentioned it earlier when talking about Stick RPG since it's by the same devs, and that game has references to it. In the game, you pick up and drop goons with your mouse that are trying to invade the castle, and they splat onto the ground. That's really it. With the lightning round done, I want to keep this Stickman stuff rolling, since that was a pretty big part of my Flash experience, I won't lie. And this didn't even scratch the surface, so we're moving on to the next chapter. So why was stick stuff so popular, or at least so prevalent during the time? Well, the simple answer is that they were just very simple and easy to animate. I mean, it's stick, guys. Like, look at this. You could make this right now if you wanted. Even the most inexperienced animators, like 0 experience, could get into stick animation, and they were programs just for that, letting you make little frame-by-frame animations without needing Flash or anything. I actually remember using one of these called Pivot, and while you were pretty limited in what you could actually do, it was still pretty awesome to be able to make my own version of what I saw online with 0 skill whatsoever. All those animations are long lost to time now, so I can't really show you any. You just have to take my word that I used to make a lot of stuff in Pivot. Now, another reason why these blew up, and this is just an opinion, not a fact, is that since they were just stick figures, they could go really buck nutty on the gore, and it wasn't really a problem. And when I say that, I really mean it, because some of these stick animations got big time violent. And back in the day, my little fiend mind loved all the violence and blood. Now, I used to pretty much exclusively watch stick figure stuff online for a good while when I was a kid. I would watch literally anything with them in it. But one day I just stopped, like completely. I don't know why. I guess I grew out of it, but I just stopped watching Stickman stuff one day. There's no broad message there or anything. I wanted to say that. Yeah. Anyways, though, that's enough about me. Let's take a little break from games, a little short break, and talk some animations, both classics and ones I remember from back in the day. Gonna start out with one of the all-time greats, not just for stick animation, for Flash animation as a whole. The Flash Deck Counter-Strike series just appeared out of nowhere like 20 years ago, made like half a dozen iconic videos, and then just disappeared off the face of the earth. These are filled with pretty good animation for the time, tons of in-jokes for Counter-Strike players that still hold up, gags, action sequences, and they've got decent length to boot. The quality jump from the first one, CS Mansion, to the last one, Dust 2, is massive, and there was only a gap of a couple years between the two. Also, I'm pretty sure Dust 2 is like literally the most viewed video on Counter-Strike as a whole on YouTube. It's got like 120 million views. I did some research into this one, and it seems these animations kinda put Flash Deck on the map a little bit, as the guy behind it went on to be a professional animator in the games industry, most recently being the lead cinematic animator for Star Wars Jedi Survivor. Honestly, pretty crazy how you can go from starting with something as simple as Counter-Strike stick animations to that. Good on this guy. Another one of the all-time greats, not just for stick figure stuff, but as a whole. And I know I'm saying all-time greats a lot in this video, but it's true. Animator versus animation is such a unique and cool concept. In the video, the animator, represented by the mouse, draws up this little stick guy called Victim, but he starts to revolt. Now this leads to a massive battle within the program, where they're blowing up parts of the program, they're drawing weapons to use and like throwing keyframes at each other. It's awesome. The series continued with Animator vs. Animation 2, which ramps things up even more, taking the battle to the computer's desktop where the figure, now named the Chosen One, is going fighting desktop icons like the AOL Messenger logo, using paintbrushes from the MS Paint logo to fight, and even the antivirus software gets involved to try and take out the Chosen One. It ends with the Chosen One getting captured and locked away by the antivirus. After this, 3 came out, and then 4, and then Animation vs. Minecraft, and then Animation vs. YouTube, and you get the picture. Alan Becker, the guy behind this one, took the concept and absolutely ran with it, and it paid off as he sits at like 25 million subs as of now. Everything past parts 3 or 4 of the original series is kind of venturing out of the classic Flash animation territory though, so I'm going to leave this one here. Definitely a top tier series though, and one of the biggest things to come out of Flash as a whole. Also was a little story. When I was in like grade 8, we had a teacher who loved these so much that he forced the class to watch them with him. Nothing more to it than that, but that's the reach these had. Everybody loved these. Kids, adults, teachers. You could show these to anybody and they would like it. Alright, back to weird, violent, crudely animated stick stuff I watched when I was a kid. Back like 15 years ago, a bunch of videos came out, and I don't know the origin point. There would be like a pit or a cliff or something that stick figures would try to cross over, which usually ended in them just falling down and dying. First one of these I remember seeing was a video called The Cliff 2 by Zeph Patterson. It's just 4 minutes of these little goons trying to cross this cliff with bodies piling up at the bottom the whole time. I'd list more of them, but they can literally all be described the exact same way and have very similar names. Some even have the exact same name as this one. Like there's another video called The Cliff 2 by a different guy, which also has like 10 million views and is pretty much the exact same thing, but it's a different video. I don't know what was going on in the mid-2000s, man. I figure I'll wrap back to Zao Zao to end this one out by talking about the animation side of it. It starts out pretty simple with these two having a little scuffle. That's it, really. In the next one, Zao Zao 3, things get crazy. There's a whole house worth of guys fighting, and it's probably one of the most famous of the series. Without getting too into it, because I want to move on to the games, by the later ones in the series, there's fully choreographed 3D gunfights and kung fu fights, and it gets pretty crazy. Though like I said earlier, I recommend just checking this series out. Now let's move on to the main event. We got games to play! Territory War was another one of my favorites as a kid. It's a game where 2 teams are pitted against each other and have to use a handful of weapons to remove the other guys from existence. Now I never noticed this as a kid, but this game is kind of just a very simplified version of Worms, and I played Worms as a kid, so I don't know how I never saw the connection. If you don't know Worms, it's like the same thing but with way more weapons and, well, your worms. You can play this one in PvE or PvP if you've got a buddy, and as for gameplay, each team is anywhere from 1 to 6 guys at any time. The rounds are turn-based, and on every turn, each team gets to move 1 guy and use 1 item on that turn. Repeat this until 1 team's been wiped out. The loadout is very simple. You've got a rifle, grenades, and a kick, but they get the job done. It's nothing in comparison to Worms, but for a Flash game, it's fine. Really, when I was a kid, I was just happy to have any way to live out the stickman battle scenes you'd see in some of these animations from back then, and this game definitely lets you do that. It's also got a campaign with a bunch of different levels, each with some classic Newgrounds music, including one by Paragon X9, who also has a song in Mario 63, as mentioned earlier. Sadly, the thing with the soundtrack is it was not full songs, but rather short samples of songs looped endlessly, which can get pretty maddening after a while, I won't lie. It's also very heavily compressed, which does not help. As for some things I noticed while playing this, the AI is absolute dog shit. They will straight up throw matches in the most blatant ways possible, like shooting straight into the ground, shooting their own team in the head, or just whipping grenades at nothing. I assume this is based on difficulty, but it's always hilarious watching the AI line up a shot for like a minute straight, right into the floor, and then they just go back into a static pose. Another thing with this game is that the rifle is just without a doubt the best weapon in the game. I mean, sure, the grenade can hit multiple people, but the rifle has perfect accuracy and does half a health bar in headshot. It's broken, it's busted. Overall, this is a classic that there really isn't much to, but it was a very fun time nonetheless. There's a couple sequels that I never played. Territory War 3 in particular seems to really be Worms with Stickmen, even more so than this. Alright, moving on. This video is just filled with all-timers. We got another one here. The Henry Stickmin series is a truly legendary Flash series, and is one of relatively few to hold its weight as a full-release Steam game. That full-release Steam game, by the way, came with remastered content and a whole new mission. For this, though, we're looking at the Flash game, specifically the OG, Breaking the Bank. In this game and the rest of the series, you're basically playing a choose-your-own-adventure story, where you watch a story unfold and make various choices along the way, usually ending in disaster. Now, before we break the bank, there's a sort of prototype game that's referenced in the other ones called Crossing the Pit. It was made about a year before Breaking the Bank, and it has a similar choice system. From this, you can definitely see the formula they were coming up with for the main series. Also, you literally can't win this game. You always fall. Funny. Back to the bank breaking. There's a bunch of different options to break in, but only one actually beats the game, where you sneak into the bank by hiding in a money sack. You instantly get caught though, which leaves it on a cliffhanger for the next game. The other options to pick either end in disaster or just don't work, but the game just lets you retry from the start right away. This one isn't very complex and just sort of laid the groundwork for the rest of the series to come, which all got much more in-depth with their choices. Now before we swap to the next game, I just want to say one notable thing with this one is that this is a very rare type of Stickman game to have next to no blood or gore at all. Truly exceptional. Now with escaping the prison, this is where things really got rolling with the Henry Stickmin series, and it gets a lot more fun with the choices you can make. In this one, the choices aren't one and done, and usually have secondary, tertiary, and sometimes more choices to make after the initial one, along with action scenes that have QTEs. This one also has multiple endings, ranging from this one, which is just a big Ace Attorney reference, where you get proven innocent in court, to another where you get into a big gunfight in the main entrance and just walk out of jail. The series really molded into its own thing with this game, and only continued to improve after this, with more choices, longer games, and better animation. If you pick these up, pick up the collection on Steam that I mentioned earlier. It's the definitive way to play these. Also, if you didn't know, the creator of this one is one of the creators of Among Us, which is neat. Stick RPG 2 is the official sequel to the Flash classic Stick RPG, which we talked about earlier. It's similar to that one, being a day-to-day living as a Stickman RPG, but this one has a lot more depth, content, graphical fidelity, and is overall just a better version of the first. It also takes place canonically after you win the first one by becoming a self-made CEO billionaire god king, with the plot of this one basically being that you simply fell off the island and landed on this one. It's pretty fun overall. There's all kinds of quests, jobs, Easter eggs, and other activities to do in this one, and a playthrough can last you a solid amount of time depending on what you want to do. Though it seems the best strategy is still to put every dime you make into the bank and just sleep on it, and let that daily interest roll in to make you a billionaire. Sadly, in the Flash version, a whole island's worth of content is locked behind the paid Director's Cut edition, which kinda sucks a bit, but they want to get paid for their work, and that's fair. I actually bought the Director's Cut on Steam a few years ago, but they didn't scale the resolution properly, with it being stuck at like 640 by 480, so it just looks awful on any monitor made after like 2004. And on top of this, you only get a handful of new things for the $20 price tag, despite it seeming like the whole locked island is pretty big. It really isn't. Anyways, I just wanted to give it a brief mention since it's the official sequel to one of the biggest Flash games ever, but I don't really have any nostalgia for it since it released way after the first game, and I never really played it. For this, I just kind of went around looking for fights like an NPC in a Yakuza game. This one also has a combat demo listed on Flashpoint that says it was released in 2005, so this one had been in development for a while. I think they took the combat system here and turned it into their mega hit game, Stick Arena Dimensions, but I could be wrong on that. Also, I think that game is unplayable now due to being an online multiplayer-only Flash game. Another one lost to time. Whatever the case may be, this one's a worthy follow-up to the original, and is definitely worth checking out if you never knew about it, but love the classic version. Shopping Cart Hero is another simple one that I found pretty fun back in the day. It's one of those games where you just kind of keep trying to launch something as far as possible and you get paid for doing it, and for things like distance and tricks. You could use that cash to fund upgrades to make your stuff go further, and yeah, just kind of repeat that until you won. Another example of this kind of game would be the game Learn to Fly, that game with the penguin doing pretty much the exact same thing as this. If you played that, you're probably seeing similarities. Funnily enough, these two games were released only a couple months apart, with Shopping Cart Hero releasing a few months before Learn to Fly. I might be missing a game that this formula originates from though, like with Crush the Castle, so excuse me if there's something like that. I simply didn't know about it. Going a bit more in depth into this one, you had a shopping cart which you could strap rockets to, put slick wheels on, or get some groupies along for the ride. You got paid for distance and altitude, and with that cash you could put bigger rockets on, get more groupies, or you could buy tricks to do midair. It's very simple, and I don't know if this first one even has an actual ending. It might just go on forever. It didn't end with just one game though, as this one spawned a couple sequels with expanded gameplay. By the point of the third one, there's a ton of different upgrades, and it's pretty much all around the best the series has to offer. But, and it's a big but, it was released in 2011, which was kind of the beginning of the end for Flash, as already games like this were opting for mobile releases rather than browsers. This one in particular seems like a pretty low effort port of the mobile version, since the UI in it has options for in-app purchases, which don't exactly work on desktop. I looked into it just a bit deeper, and from here the series kind of solely continued on mobile, so this was just an early example of these kinds of games leaving the PC market. I don't really have much more to say about the series because it's very simple, but really I just wanted to show that by the early 2010s, Flash games were already in pretty dire straits with the rise of mobile gaming, especially ones like this that are just primo for getting monetized with microtransactions to speed things up. Let's get things back on topic though, and check out some more games. This one's called Hapland, and I never even liked this one, but I still tried to beat it so many times when I was younger. It's this weird point-and-click puzzle game where you're trying to do something. I don't even know. I just click stuff, and sometimes it worked, and sometimes it didn't. It's a very, very strange game. Actually hopping into it, I found that you're just trying to open this portal here. That's it. That's all you're supposed to do. I had to look up a walkthrough because this one is so goddamn obtuse. I hate it so much. But this was the first time I've ever actually beaten it after like 13 years. It was underwhelming. There's 2 sequels as well, but I'm really not in the mood for more weird trial and error puzzles at all. Fun little nostalgic trip though, even if I hate the game. Next. One genre of games that was like really big in the stick figure gaming space was sniper and assassin games. These were just everywhere. Like, there were so goddamn many of these. It's not really a mystery why either. I'm not gonna pretend like, oh, I don't know, why was there so many of these? Like, they aren't the hardest thing in the world to make. It's a crosshair over the screen with a target somewhere in the level, and you click on their head. That's the winning formula. Some devs decided to keep things simple and just made a bunch of levels that progressed with no overarching story or anything. But some took it like 9 steps further and had full lore, animated stories, and like fight scenes between levels. It could get pretty crazy. The general rundown that I can give is that the more elaborate the stories and cutscenes were, the edgier they were, and these got pretty edgy. There was also ones that didn't just have snipers, but generally the sniper ones were the biggest. This formula really is a winning one though, because even years and years past when all these were made, app stores were and probably still are just flooded with similar games being dumped onto them. I'm pretty sure Hitman's Sniper Assassin reignited the spark, and that game is pretty much just a more realistic version of this formula. Now I have no clue if these still flood the mobile game market because I don't play phone games like at all, but I wouldn't be surprised. While the gameplay for most of these is just get a description of the target and take them out, some were a bit more creative. A notable one I remember but never really played was the Sift Heads series. It's this crazy mafia story with cutscenes and dialogue, as well as the usual sniper type missions as the others. Again though, I never really played these, so I don't have too much to say on them. All I know is that they're a lot more high effort than most of them. One other type of game genre that was pretty popular to make back then. I don't really think they have a proper name, so I'm just going to call them death pickers. These were games where you had a list of options to kill a stickman that was usually locked up or being tested on. Pretty much all of these were glorified animations, and the only real game part was clicking a button for how you wanted to see them dead. My sick and twisted, devious, mischievous little mind still loved them, especially ones like Kill Crazy J or Die in Style. If there's one in particular I'll talk about, it's that one, because it's comedically edgy, but also pretty memorable. Right out of the gate, they've got voice clips in the menu where he says some stuff so edgy, it physically cut me like a knife.
I laugh at the face of death. They might kill me, but they won't scare me. What are we doing here anyway? Does any of it matter? Also in the menu you can start the game, or check out the files on who the guy in the menu is. He's some psycho-sicko crazy-path with a rap sheet long enough to be considered an essay, and he's been sentenced here to be tested on. Once you actually get into the game, things kind of simmer down with you simply choosing ways for him to die. Usually in these he makes some kind of escape attempt, and in one of these he actually manages to escape the facility, which is actually a kind of cool twist because not a lot of these did that. Pretty much none of them did that. This is the only one I know of that did that, really. Now for some reason I used to like watching these death pickers as a kid, but for some reason at the same time I hated horror movies and other gory media, despite there being some pretty obvious overlap there.
Now, I've had a bit of a reversal in my interest since I was a kid. I remember specifically back then being pretty freaked out at Mad Max, which, not even a horror movie. I was freaked out at that when their eyes bulged out of their head before crashing. Now, that's super tame compared to a lot of the shit in these Death Pickers, but for some reason I just hated it. Nowadays, that series is one of my favorites, and at the same time, I pretty much find all these Death Pickers just kind of overly edgy and silly, and most of them aren't even, like, entertaining either. I don't know. Tangent over. That's the end of this segment. Now this part has nothing to do with Flash at all, it's purely a bonus section, but I legit had a flashback during this segment to something I had completely forgotten about from when I was a kid. Does anybody remember Cube World? They were these little Tamagotchi style cubes you got with little stick figures in them. If you had multiple, you could connect the two, and the guys inside would have special interactions. The boys within would even walk across cubes and sometimes even multiple cubes just to chill with the homies, and that was such a neat little thing. I used to have a few of these, including some big ones that had more animations, but by now they're long gone, so I can't like show those off. I feel like I had to mention these though because I feel like in a way it shows just how big stick figure stuff as a whole had gotten. They were getting their own toys by Mattel, and I'm sure this isn't the only example, just one that I happen to remember. While this video is primarily about Flash games, I really don't want to ignore the animation side of Flash, as that's just as important. We've already looked at some of the Stickman stuff, so I figured I would at least look at some of the others that I remember from when I was a kid. Now, I'll keep things on the level here. Most animations I watched as a wee boy were stick figure ones, or ones that I've just forgotten about over the years. So this section will be pretty brief. None of these ones I picked that I did remember are like hidden gems or anything. They're all pretty fairly mainstream, but I want to talk about them anyways. Gonna start things strong with one of the weirdest and most popular Flash animations ever, with Salad Fingers. Created in 2004 by David Firth, this one is, and I say is because the series is still going, an animated series following the titular Salad Fingers as he does weird, creepy things in a grimy, surreal world. The whole series has this nasty atmosphere in a good way, which ranges from gross and creepy character designs to the overall world it takes place in, which is mostly lifeless and empty. The first episode has the hunchback salad-fingered Salad Fingers introduce himself and his hobby, caressing rusty spoons. After this, Salad Fingers goes on to find more spoons and finds a small shack. This bug-eyed little kid answers the door and just kind of screeches at him, and Salad Fingers makes his way inside. He asks the kid where the spoons are, gets screeched at again, and then bam, it's over. The other episodes are equally as surreal and weird, so I'd recommend just checking them out, as I don't want to spoil too much. Now, I remember someone showing me these in like 2006, when I was way too young to understand them, or really watch them at all, but I kind of thought they were like funny, especially the spoon bit, so I didn't get like traumatized by these or anything. I think watching these at such a young age kind of pushed me into being into Flash stuff in years following, so overall let's call it a positive thing to show children weird, creepy, surreal content when they're very young. This one isn't really a specific animation, but rather a sort of micro-genre within Flash animations as a whole. Back in the day, and probably still now, I'm going to be honest, there was a near endless amount of Mario animations where the joke was usually just like,
Mario goes crazy, Mario but real, Goomba blood, Mario with gun, Mario shoot Bowser, say swear word, what?
It was, I gotta tell you, it was a hell of a time to be alive. I do not remember a single one of these in particular, because I'm gonna keep it real, they all kind of blend into one another in my head. I found a playlist with a bunch of them, which kind of sparked my memory. I mean, who can forget such classic videos like Funny Mario 5? And, of course, who can forget? Oh my god, I love this one. Mario's Bad Day 17. Some truly all-timer status Flash legends. I mean, these damn kids today, these goddamn kids today have their professionally animated, full-length indie projects. Get out of here. Shit doesn't even compare to the absolute nuclear kino like Super Mario fail. No, but in all seriousness, all of these are pretty much as described. Internet comedy standards have kind of moved on from these being funny, but at the time they were the peak of comedy. And the numbers don't lie either, as there's a ton with views in the tens of millions. 2005's Ultimate Showdown of Ultimate Destiny is a music video culmination of pop culture stuff that was relevant in the era that it was made. As the name implies, it's a giant brawl with stuff like old Godzilla hopping around, Chuck Norris, Batman, Optimus Prime, Shaquille O'Neal, and a bunch of others just duking it out, throwing haymakers at each other. This one is almost 20 years old, so there's really not much I can say about it that hasn't already been said, but at the same time it's old enough that newer generations probably haven't heard of this. If you're in that category, it's a 3-minute watch, so check out this legendary piece of internet history. It's a must-watch. I was kind of struggling to find one more big thing to talk about on here, so I kind of cheated a little bit and decided we're going to talk about Clay World.
Look at all these pancakes! We're gonna be rich!
It's not Flash at all, but it's from the era, and another legit classic series, and on top of that, I doubt I will ever get another chance to discuss it. This series is a bunch of comedic claymation videos that are loosely connected from the mid-2000s, and they are pure cinema. Pure cinema. Absolute peak. They're so good. The series was made by Robert Benfer and progressed from janky little low-quality animations to a full-length movie and a 30-minute finale in 2015. The difference in quality from the first few to the last in terms of camera, animation, and model quality, it's nuts. Put them side by side, they look like a different series. There's a ton of episodes, all with unique stories and gags, and pretty much all of them are solid. As a personal recommendation for those who haven't seen it, Pancake Minds is a true classic video. It's ridiculous, it's stupid, and I love it. Another good few to check out would be Henry's Shotgun, Bank Robbery, and Grenade Gregory. But really, just watch them all from start to finish, and you're in for a good time. Oh, but hold on there, buddy. You didn't think we were doing the Madness Combat Mania section, now did ya? You really thought I'd forget one of the biggest things to come out of Newgrounds and Flash? Get out of here! No, Madness Combat deserves its own little segment, which we're doing right now. Madness Combat is a big series of Flash animations by Matt Jolly, better known as Crinkles online. Originally starting out in 2002 with Madness Combat, the series follows Hank J. Wimbledon as he Madness combats through 11 episodes of Madness Combat. The series follows a loose story, but let's be real, it mainly exists to have a bunch of sick action scenes where the protagonists just wipe the floor with like 100 guys in the span of 5 minutes. The series begins in a park. In this park, a man is playing the iconic chicken dance a little too loud for this guy's liking. He walks over and politely asks him to turn it down, but only receives a swift punch in the face. Now this was potentially the biggest mistake in history within this universe, as the punchee is none other than Hank J. Wimbledon. This lone punch sets into motion the events of Madness Combat, where Hank is on a never-ending rampage against pretty much anything that stands in his way. Just within the first episode, he's already made enemies with the big guy Jesus himself and kills multiple zombies. Within the next few episodes, Hank goes after more targets and usually ends up getting killed. Each episode he comes back more and more gnarled and ripped apart, until episode 6, Antipathy, where he's just completely covered in bandages and is literally missing his entire jaw. Also, throughout most of these early episodes, he runs into a number of recurring characters, both friend and foe. The most iconic of the bunch is Tricky the Clown, a crazed killer who also undergoes a resurrection that only makes him more powerful. He becomes one of the main antagonists of the series and comes back in numerous episodes. He's also sort of the poster child of the series alongside Hank. Another character of note that we mentioned is Jesus, or Jeebus, who has a very important halo around his head that comes into play big time later in the series. And of course, how could I not mention the GOATs, my boys Sanford and Deimos. They just kind of appear in episode 5 to give Hank a sword and then seemingly die, but later episodes show that they ended up fine, and from then on they serve as allies to Hank. Hank's actions in the series don't go unnoticed though, as a mysterious entity called the Auditor appears and founds the AAHW, or Agency Against Hank Wimbledon. Throughout the series, this agency gets progressively more dangerous as new types of soldiers are introduced, such as mag agents, which are just huge guys. As an aside, and this has been said before plenty of times, but it's very funny that this guy is so dangerous, he has an entire agency specifically to take him out. That's top tier writing, that's peak fiction. That's really enough of a lore dump for now though. I might save a full version of that for another time. Overall, this series has 11 main episodes as of now, with a 12th in the works, but if you count the various side episodes, 0.5 episodes, as well as .FLA episodes, that number is heavily bumped up. Personally, my favorite is 9.5, with my runner-up being 6. The series actually had a sort of pilot a few months before Madness Combat came out, called Marshmallow Madness, but that's not canon, so we're not going to dive into it. I just thought it was worth a mention. Now there's also a massive number of fan animations and fan games, as the series was both massively popular and pretty easy to draw. The series was so big and spawned so many fan animations that Newgrounds even has a dedicated Madness Day, where the best fan works are awarded a cash prize. The best part about this one is that it's still active to this day, with the last one happening just a couple months ago in September. Gotta say it though, undoubtedly the most notable recent fan work has to be the Tricky mod for Funf, as it reached massive levels of popularity and kind of spawned a new wave of Madness fans. Again though, I'm not the guy to talk about with that. I don't know anything that's going on with that series. I know it by proxy pretty much. As for me though, I watched Madness up to probably around episode 6 or 7 when I was younger, and then I kind of just forgot about the series for a long time for some reason. Like, I legitimately completely forgot it for years. Until one day the new game popped up on my Steam recommended tab, and I had a brain blast remembering the series. Then after that I binged all the cartoons in one night, and I bought the game. Now speaking of games, let's get into that side of Madness. The first officially produced game, with art from Crinkles himself, was a game called Madness Interactive, released all the way back in 2003. I don't know if it was the first Madness game, but it's the first one that really matters. It's ridiculously hard, kind of a mess, and the mouse isn't even locked to the screen, which kind of sucks in a game where you control weapons purely with mouse input. But I gotta say, it looks cool, and it does a pretty goddamn good job at emulating what the earlier episodes feel like on screen. Now, Project Nexus. This was the first real Madness game, which I think is canon to the series. This one was developed by Michael Swain, primarily known for the Blockhead series, and has art and story by Crinkles. This one is much more of a game than interactive, with improved shooting, movement, and level design, and pretty much everything else. I don't really want to give too much away with this one because it's still worth playing, but in it you take control of Hank, Sanford, and Deimos, and blast through a bunch of levels, killing all kinds of AAHW goons along the way. There's also an optional but phenomenal arena mode, where you fight waves of goons, and build up a squad of your own while leveling skills, buying weapons, armor, and drip, and managing your crew to fight harder and harder waves. This mode can legit last you hours, and it's super addicting. The only real criticism I have for this game is that the levels can be a bit confusing, and the enemies turn low quality when they die, but I think that's more of a Flash optimization thing. Really, a lot of the issues in this one can be chalked up to Flash things rather than like game things, as this game kind of pushes Flash to its limits, with a ton of enemies, guns, shell casings, and bloodstains all over the screen at once. Overall though, give this one a shot. It's one of the best Flash games ever created. As for the sequel, also called Project Nexus, I know it's confusing, so we'll just call it Project Nexus 2 for now. That's on Steam and is absolutely worth every penny if you're a Madness fan, or even just an indie game fan. Like, it's great. It's pretty much just an expanded 3D continuation of Project Nexus 1, with all kinds of lore, plenty of levels, even more characters to play as, an expanded arena mode. Like, legit, this game is absolutely worth it. It's packed with content, and it plays great. I played this one for... I'm going to live check right now. I'm going to open Steam and I'm going to live check right now how long I've played this one for. This is for you guys. I played this game for about 40 hours. Okay, so you'll get your money's worth. On top of all this shit, the lore in this game too is pretty extensive and intense. I mean, just as a reference, the main series' lore is like, the sheriff is pissing me off. I'm going to kill him. This guy didn't turn his music down. I'm going to kill him. Well, you got Project Nexus lore over here, and it's like...
This is Dr. Herman Gunn, head of Nexus City Robotronics.
Subject 1 to
on the establishment of Project Nexus
and the training,
innovative
along
branch.
with the original game may serve better as a playable version of the movies, but Project Nexus 2 is just better all around as an actual game in pretty much every way. Also, check out the live action trailers for Project Nexus 2, like, they're awesome. The last thing I want to mention with the series is the incredible work by Cheshire, which is, I think that's how you say that. He gives a really distinct and unique style to each Madness animation, and his songs are just great. Without his work on the series, I seriously doubt it would have been as big as it was, because every track just fits every episode so perfectly. He also contributed to the Project Nexus soundtrack, as well as the Project Nexus 2 soundtrack alongside Lochnar, who also did fantastic work and has some awesome tracks in the game. The music from the animations was so impactful for a lot of people that there have been multiple collab albums in that same style called Somewhere in Nevada, so if you're into Madness type music, check those out. Some of them even have new songs by Cheshire and Lochnar themselves. Back to some quality gaming. I've got 5 more things to look at. Let's get to it. Grow Cube is a pretty fun little puzzle game I remember playing because it's just so nice looking. I mean, look at this. It's a cute game all around. How are you gonna say no to this? This is just one in a series of games where you can basically build a little society on a cube or other objects by selecting a bunch of different advancements. It's not randomized or a simulation or anything like that, but the order in which you choose things will determine your overall effectiveness and the end outcome. Since there's 10 options to choose from, there's a ton of replayability because every option affects everything differently. Water's going to make plants grow, people will start digging holes, fossils will start growing, tubes will grow longer. It's weird, yeah it's weird, but it's good. Trust me. I don't know if this was even the first one in the series. I think that was Grow RPG, which is also pretty good, but I like Cube more. I can remember playing this one with some buddies and trying to solve it together without looking up anything online. I don't think we ever even came that close, but that was always fun. After looking it up on Flashpoint just to check, and yeah, there's a bunch of these, which is awesome because it's a great formula. Highly recommend giving these a try if you're ever bored. Raft Wars was a turn-based combat game where you could blast various foes with tennis balls. You could knock them off their rafts and boats into the water, or just kill them by pelting them with enough balls. You clash against various foes in this one. You got pirates, Vikings, gangsters, the neighbors, and a few more on top of that. It's another game that's pretty Worms inspired, especially in the voice lines, which are pretty much just Worms lines. You can upgrade your raft in this one, which gives you a few more buddies that'll help you fight. Over the game you get a dog and then a buddy to help you shoot, all while the raft itself continues to expand. It's a very simple game where the best strategy is to just shoot at max power, pretty much straight ahead on every turn. If you want to get fancy with it, you can make it a rocket or a grenade while doing the exact same thing. It's fun though, and it's got a bunch of levels as well as a sequel, and I think even a remake that was made pretty recently. Definitely one of the bigger Flash games back in the day, and it holds up decently today. I don't really have too much more to say on this because it's very simple, but it was too iconic not to mention. Clash and Slash. This one isn't too notable, but it's another one of those ones where I searched for it for years and years and could just never find it. The same thing goes for the next two, so there's a bit of a theme for the next little bit here, being games that I thought were just lost to time or that I'd made up in my head. The reason I found this one isn't because Flashpoint or anything, but one day, by just absolute sheer luck, the OST appeared in my recommended for just some reason, and I could not believe it. Because I'd been thinking about this one for years and I had no idea what the name was. It's a planetary defense shoot-'em-up type game where you orbit around Earth and shoot incoming alien ships. You could get some upgrades for Earth in your ship to make things easier, but besides that it was pretty simple. Just shoot aliens and make sure Earth doesn't get blown up. I think there was a full version of this with a bit more to it that you can buy, but I never found this one interesting enough to warrant that. I always found the art style in this one very strange, which really stuck out to me. It's reminiscent of janky 90s CGI, which it basically is, and I love that look, which, I mean, that's really the only reason this one stood out to me so much back in the day. Also, as a side note, I don't know why this one's called Clash and Slash. Like, that sounds like a night game, but this one doesn't have clashing or slashing, just shooting and scooting. Last bit that's notable about this game is that it's got jock jams. Like, listen to this. Blue Rabbit's Climate Chaos. I don't think many people have heard of this one, and I really only have it on here because it's another one where I found it only because of Flashpoint. I had remembered for years and years playing this one back in like 2007, but I never knew the name of it. And by the time I finally decided to go looking for it, Flash was kind of shut down. So after doing some research online, I finally managed to find what it was called, checked Flashpoint, gave it a shot, and after all those years of searching, all those years of thinking about it, it was kind of okay. I never really sat down to beat it or anything because the game isn't really that interesting. The desire to find the game was just kind of a constant itch that I could never scratch until a couple of years ago. In the game, you head to an island, and I'm going to be honest here, I don't really know what the goal of the game is because the dialogue is just gibberish with images to convey what the characters are saying. It's a really weird decision too because apparently it's Egoraptor, like that Egoraptor doing the voices, but it's just him making noises, which seems like a bit of a waste. I kind of just walked around for a while and eventually made progress, I think, but I didn't know what to do, so I just got off of this one. I gotta say though, nice animation, very smooth, and it looks 3D, even though I'm pretty sure it's all hand-drawn. Now the creators behind this one have gone on to make some pretty cool stuff beyond Flash games. I saw they did snipper clips for the Switch, and obviously Ego Raptor went on to be very successful as well. Alright, I swear, this is the last of the games I had stuck in my head, but couldn't remember the name of games. And I gotta say, this one is the most obscure, without a doubt. I had this one stuck on my head for at least 10 years not knowing what it was or if it was even real. Anytime I tried to look it up, I was mostly flooded with is it the Neverhood type answers because it's claymation. It's a game called Tomb of Doom, and I only found this one by Hail Mary guessing names in Flashpoint. All I could remember about this one was that it was claymation and you explored a tomb, so I looked up tomb, saw the thumbnail, and bada bang, we were in the money. We already talked about Clay World, so it's no big secret I was a big fan of that and any other claymation stuff as a kid, but games using claymation, let alone Flash games using claymation, were exceptionally rare. So when I found this one back in the day, it was like a miracle. The game is a simple point and click adventure. This Indiana Jones type clay character falls down a hole into a tomb of doom and has to venture through it to find an exit. It's very simple with easy puzzles, a pretty small map and identical rooms, and is honestly pretty bad, but you always gotta respect the effort that goes into claymation stuff, as this probably took more effort than most Flash games of the era. So this is still cool in my book. Also, the game ends on a cliffhanger that was never resolved, so, you know, there's not much more to talk about. That kind of sucks. I wanted to close out the games in this video by looking at one of the greatest productions of mankind, Cool Math Games. This was a website which was made to trick teachers into thinking their students were playing math-related games, even though pretty much everything on here was just regular Flash games. It definitely looked the part though, as at a glance, this one absolutely looked like a 90s math website. And if anyone asked, all you had to say was, oh look, it's just math games, see it says on the screen right there. And 9 times out of 10 that worked. The site still exists, but was overhauled and redesigned. But to be honest with this one, I really don't even see much of a point for it still to exist. Like, won't kids today just play games on their phones? I guess since it's still up, it still has some traffic to it, so here's hoping today's youth are keeping this one alive. I played a handful of games from badass math games that I remember playing back in school for this, so let's start with the first one, which was called Run. It's a simple game where you play as this little blob guy running through hallways with scattered pits, which you've got to avoid if you fear death. Back when I was in school, this game and its sequel, Run 2, were pretty much the only game we played for a while. Once we found these, we would have legit little tournaments to see who could get the furthest without dying, and these tournaments got heated and intense. Emotions were at an all-time high during these, and I'm pretty sure I remember one time we got kicked off of the school computers because we were getting way too into it. If I remember correctly, we used the quality setting to try and get better frames as a strategy, since it was actually needed back then. These are solid games though, worth a try, not math related in the slightest. Now if you wanted something actually math flavored on crazy math games, look no further than Crazy Taxi M12. This is literally just a game where you rear-end plow through cars that are multiples of a given number, and that's it. These people are dead. It's super basic and pretty trash, but if you wanted to remain gaming back then, ones like this were safe picks, since technically, they're actual math games, which gave you some deniability. Last one we're looking at here on insane nutso math games is one called Fireboy and Water Girl in the Forest Temple. Gotta be one of the most popular games on the site, as even today it's still in their top 10 list. In this one you gotta work with a buddy to get to the end of some platforming levels. Each of you has a different element, fire and water, obviously from the title, and you can dodge different hazards on each level. You've gotta work together if you want to reach the end though. This one was very fun with a friend, and if you had a bunch of people you could swap in and out since it's pretty easy to die in this one. If you couldn't tell, this footage was me playing both at once, which hurts my cerebellum trying to do it. I could actively feel my brain veins pulsating at a rapid pace. Alright, we're going to change things up here a little bit. We're going to do a little grab bag where I'm just going to play whatever games the Flashpoint randomizer gives me. Let's see what we get. Alright, grab bag. Escape Supreme Baton. Oh, this sucks. How do you keep moochers away? What's going on? Get the hell away from my goddamn candy. These little mooches. Get the hell away from my gum. You little Here we go with Brain Boggler. Hey kids. Alright, are you ready to get your brain boggled? Alright, I'm not gonna lie. I'm getting boggled right now. I have no idea what the answers are to any of these. Alright, let's get it on. We got web trading cars chase. Alright, which car are we picking here? The grease? Oh. Oh, yeah. Oh, we gotta go with the grease. It's gotta be the grease.
Let's get it! Keep it going, Grease! Go, go! Go, 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 go!
Here we go. This one's one of the greats. One of the best Flash games of, ever. Like a fartery. I don't think it works.
What animals are you going to show us now?
What do you got today?
Felix.
Alright, we got one of my favorites here. We got, Clemson University images of the Singapore program. This is one of the greats. Alright, let's go. We got Batman snowboarding. Batman's dead. Back again. We got another all-timer here. Another all-time classic. We got Elsa washing dishes.
Welcome to Glulo.
Glue. Minion Girl wedding party. Let's go. That's it. Here we go. 2112 Chapter 4. 2112 Corporation Chapter 4. I gotta find out about fast. Is this real? This is like kind of cool. Holy moly, this one, this is actually pretty cool. I like this one. This one is actually sick. I love this one. What's that? Guy in the toilet. Nuke him. Alright, which barnyard animal are you? Let's figure it out. You're walking in the woods and you see several slouching, growling forms slowly approaching from the shadows. I gotta say, what's going on, boys? When you first walk into a party, you gotta start choking the chickens there, bud. I'm the evil guy. Flappy Tinkerbell. That's it. Where do I live? Where do I live? The gray angelfish? That's in the ocean. You're going back home to the ocean. That's gotta be in America. This gotta be in America. This gotta be in America. This gotta be in America. That's gotta be in America. Alright, we're back with some Super Mario Bus gameplay. This is one of those ones that everyone's gotta try at some point in their life.
Oh my god! Oh fuck!
Alright, we got Super Mario Gun here. This is based off his appearance in Super Mario. Mario War Escape. This game sucks. I don't know why there's so many of these goddamn Mario games.
You wanna play with your Mario game. I had a big range as a big pain. Cause Mario might be super, but I'm super duper.
Alright, we're back. I just found another all-time classic. Forgot about this one. Everybody knows ceiling catfishing. Simplicities of life. You gotta enjoy the simple things sometimes. You gotta enjoy the simple things in life, like fishing. What's this one? Chef Boyardee X-ray machine. Nice. Nice. Looking good. It's just a showing for an apartment. Yo, we got bakery. Click the keys to go to the coffee shop. Bonjour. Help the baby find his mom. No. I gotta get my hair done. Green. Gang name defense. This is the worst one so far. Homer's Donut Run 2. Let's go. Alright, I gotta get his iconic Homer car. I don't think this one works. Oh. Hey, Merge. This is Homer's Odyssey. We got Killer 7. Simpson Adventure, Bart Simpson. Bart Simpson. Adventure. Bart. Simpson Adventure, Alright, we're doing a doctor simulator. This guy's bleeding. Let's give him a little nitroglycerin. I don't know what this one is. We got a classic here. The San Francisco airport layout. So we got all kinds of shit. Merry Christmas. Hey, Happy New Year. Happy New Year. We got Bart New Year bike. Happy New Year, everybody. We finally made it. It's been a long 365 days. We finally made it. Happy New Year, buddy. I had a terrible dream last night. My friend Mike has a terrible habit of borrowing money when we go drinking. But he could be diverted if you buy. This one is strange. At the stroke of midnight, I will take over the Silicon City's power supply and plunge the city into darkness. There's nothing you can do to stop me. Resistance is useless. Please click the box, type your first name, then let's go. Let's go. Let's go. Incoming message. We got a message. Back to the intro. Teacher page. Alright, we got the teacher page. We got the teacher page open. Electricity in our lives. We use it every goddamn day. Look at that. It all makes sense now. It all makes sense. It could kill you. It could kill you. Athletics. 100 meter sprint. Send it! Send it! That was almost world record. Gotta get the world record. That's a world record! Alright, we got the penguin game. All the clouds in Cloudland were worshipping the mystic altar. In the center of the altar was the frosty gemstone. It has powers beyond belief. But then a strange flying machine came. The shield protecting this gem was powered by 33 popsicles, and each one was scattered across Zilla, thus reducing the force field to nothing. Okay. Let's go. Oh, I gotta get the popsicles. How do I jump? There. Oh. Found it. Let's go. Let's go. Gotta get the popsicle. What is going on in this game? What is this game? I just want my goddamn popsicle. This is a boss fight? Get him. Kill him.
Kill him! Get him! Kill the bastard! Get him into that water!
Get down in that hole, boy. Oh yeah, there's a hole now. Kill him. Look at his health, look at his health! It's working! Holy shit!
It's working! I got him!
Okay. This is the best game I've ever found, ever. What is going on? When you see a key, press that key on your keyboard to make something special happen. For example, D equals door opening. Okay. This game just keeps going. This game just keeps... What is this? T? I gotta get over to him, I guess. Who are you? Where is the... Who are you? I'm Chet Cheese, the secret mouse. What is the popsicle? In the sea. Alright. Thanks, buddy. That's it? Chet Cheese? No way. Alright, this game actually, it kind of sucks, but this is still cool, I guess. It kind of sucks though. Big Fish Games. Greedy Frog. Hell yeah. Money. Smiley Gamer. We got Smiley Memory. Remember this. Bam.
Yes.
Bam.
Yes. No.
I don't know anymore.
No. 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 Yes.
What did I say about Bloxsaurus if you took away the aesthetic? What did I say about it? I said who would give a shit? And look at this. Big jump. Big jump. Monster trucks. Holy shit. We got the Neopets calendar, 2002, day 28. Christmas is already over. It is over. We've just got the full game. We've just got the full game of Five Nights at Freddy's 3 here. This is the full game. I'm not kidding around. Newton's apple. Get that apple. What do I do? Oh, I gotta get the apple to Mr. Newton over there. I gotta make it fall on his head. Let's get it. Let's go! Come on! What the hell? Come on! Yeah! We in the 3D castle? These like 90s 3D games on here are so weird. What are these even supposed to be? Are these from the 90s?
Heads up, people. It's your singing skull here. I ain't got nobody.
I don't like this one at all.
Walt, I don't know, man. You've been seeming sus lately. It's almost like we have an imposter among us.
So, all in all, what remains today of the Flash landscape? Well, as the video has shown, major Flash websites like Newgrounds still exist today, even with built-in Flash replacements to keep old Flash games chugging along even today. There also obviously exists Flashpoint, which has permanently archived the majority of browser games and animations ever made. We also have the legacy of classic Flash icons being preserved in things like Friday Night Funkin'. But for Flash itself, and the internet landscape it created, there will never be anything like that ever again. The discontinuation of Flash took away an easy and recognized avenue for immature creators to make things. But it wasn't the end of days that some were saying. Similar, improved, and easier to use programs have been popping up for years, and by the end of its lifespan, Flash could be described as nothing more than a security flaw for most websites. Those alternatives, such as Unity and HTML, have kept the spirit of browser games alive, which are still being uploaded to places like Newgrounds and itch.io. So while Flash may be lost, there are worthy successors in its place. The actual Flash animation program is also regularly used to this day, simply under the rebrand of Adobe Animate. Now what about people, games, and other things of that sort that came from Flash roots? Well, there's plenty of success stories out there. The Newgrounds segment alone had multiple, with companies like the Behemoth bursting onto the games market, and an absurd amount of animators who went on to do bigger projects in the industry. Just as a quick note before we get into the lightning round here, this stuff is very hard to quantify because there's no real sources for any of this, so excuse me if I've missed anyone obvious, because I don't know every YouTuber, singer, animator, and game dev who came from Flash and Newgrounds stuff, so excuse me if I missed anyone very obvious. I just forgot, or didn't know. An example of Flash creators moving to TV with admittedly a bit of recency bias here would be Smiling Friends. The show was co-created by former Flash funny men Zach Hadel and Michael Cusack, and features voice work and animation from numerous other Newgrounds originating talent, such as Chris O'Neill and David Firth. Chris and Zach had also previously worked together to make the Adult Swim show Hellbenders. They also run a fairly big Let's Play channel on YouTube called Oni Plays. Writer and singer of Ultimate Showdown, Neil Ciciegra, also known as Lemon Demon, has been very successful. Like, all around. Not just in any one thing. Too much to list here. I mentioned Meat Boy earlier and that we'd wrap back to it. Well, we're doing it again. Super Meat Boy went on to be a pretty massive success for Team Meat, and Edmund McMillan went on to make the mega hit Binding of Isaac and a bunch of other games. Now, I never mentioned Bloons Tower Defense despite its popularity because I never really played them, but rest assured I haven't forgotten about them. These were tower defense games where monkeys shot balloons, and it went on for a bunch of very successful games. Eventually they went big and made some full release games, with Bloons TD6 in particular being a massive success on Steam, having 97% positive reviews with 250,000 ratings. I mentioned it briefly during the segment, but Crinkles, creator of Madness, is currently working on a 12th main installment in the series, still in Flash. Also, as mentioned previously, several game developers spoken about earlier have gone on to make full projects such as Nitrome, Super Flash Brothers, and Puffballs United. Undoubtedly, the biggest thing to come out of this was Among Us. Game studio Massive Monster, notable for the game Cult of the Lamb, is composed mostly of ex-Flash animators and game devs. The creator of the Zao Zao series ended up in a lawsuit with Nike, where he was suing them for their use of stick figures in an ad that he felt were too similar to his. I don't know how, but somehow he won this, but then Nike appealed the suit and won back. Quite a story overall. And of course, numerous Flash creators have simply kept animating and making content for YouTube. Way too many to even begin recapping them without leaving some notable ones out. Chances are, if someone was at all successful back on Newgrounds back in its heyday, they likely moved to YouTube, or alternatively into the actual animation industry. With that said, a lot of others have retired from animation. Keep in mind, for a lot of Flash animations, these were simply little passion projects done by teenagers and young adults. If they weren't making any money off of it, or they stopped enjoying it, life likely got in the way and they had to stop. And the last remnants, which are going to go out one day, would be old Flash websites. Not ones like Newgrounds that have adopted and properly archived things. We're talking ones like Stickpage that literally do not function anymore. Some of these sites are straight up abandoned, so it's only a matter of time until those servers stop being paid and get shut off. There will come a day, likely soon, that all these classic Flash pages, full of games and history, are gone.
So the question's got to have boggled your mind at least once. Why did Flash Player close it all? Just what in the Sam Hill did they go and do that for? I was balled up over this myself, so I did a little perusing and uncovered the facts. Now, I'm not the most qualified to be jawing on about this, but here's what I've got. A real big reason behind the closure is the security flaws it presents, which the new players on the block didn't have. Malicious Flash files could execute code on your machine just by opening them. This was bad news for just about everybody. You see, the program was designed to have a whole lot of access to your computer, and to fix that, they would have had to have rewritten the whole thing from scratch. They decided it'd be a safer option to just close up shop on the whole dang thing. Another reason we got is an obvious one, being that open source, better, and more secure replacements started popping up and replacing Flash on websites and for game development. Things like Unity and HTML5 quickly took over as Flash replacements, but I can't speak on this one much as I'm no web developer. One early sign of impending death for Flash was that it was never released for Apple devices. This was a notably awful event, as over the course of the 2000s and 2010s, Apple's market share rapidly increased, and Flash didn't get a single piece of that pie. Steve Jobs himself even wrote an open letter, which basically ripped it to shreds, stating that it would never be on their devices for a number of reasons, including security, performance, energy consumption, and more. This had bigger impacts than you might think as well. If you were a dev in the 2010s, why not make your little Flash game idea into a mobile game instead? If it ends up hitting it big, there's plenty of room for monetization, whereas Flash had next to none. Financially, there was no real reason to make Flash games anymore. For most devs, mobile games were simply the way to go, unless they owned their own Flash website. Wrapping up on this, I want to reiterate again that I'm no expert on the subject. I'm not a dev, animator, or otherwise, just a man who's merely read a couple of the papers on the subject. There's got to be more behind the scenes and smaller issues that resulted in the closure that aren't worth digging up for this, so we're going to leave it here. And with that, I'd say this case is closed.
A lot of the games we looked at today were pretty silly and goofy, but they all meant something to someone. These games had real impact. Maybe not to the same degree as other things, but many Flash games were much more than simple wastes of time. These games, no matter how big or small, were true works of passion by developers, built for free, purely for the enjoyment of others in most cases. As for how they've impacted me, well, I just made a huge video going over them, so I think that should really speak for itself. I played most of these games years ago, over a decade for most, and I still remembered almost all of them by name. They've managed to stick around in my head longer than most things from that time in my life, and I'm very glad they've been preserved through efforts like Flashpoint. I just wanted to thank both everyone involved in the preservation efforts behind these, as well as the countless developers and animators who worked on all these. Whether you're a big shot animator now, or you retired after making one Flash game in 2004, thank you. There's plenty I missed in this video too. This is the last thing I'm recording, and it's well after I've gotten all the footage. And just during this, I've thought of a bunch of games I should have added to this video. I mean, hell, I didn't even go into Flash MMOs like Club Penguin, which were just massive back in the day. Some were bigger than actual paid MMOs. With that said, I think this video is long enough, and it's time to wrap it up. Thanks everybody for watching, thanks for 150k, and thanks to everyone involved with Flash. Bye.